Hello everybody, welcome back to Historic Subjects. Today we have a video on the timeline of the reign of kings and queens of England and Great Britain. I will be creating a separate video on each monarch in the future. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell to keep up to date. So we start off first of all with the Saxon kings, the first of which is King Aethelstan, or Aethelstan the Glorious, who is regarded by many historians as being the first true king of England. Aethelstan was born in the year 894 and began his reign in 924 as king of the Anglo-Saxons. In 927 he extended this title to King of the English until his death on the 27th of October 939. His reign lasted about 15 years, but he left no heir to the throne as he died childless, so the heir became King Aethelstan's half-brother Edmund. At the age of 18, King Edmund's reign began on the 27th of October 939, after the death of his half-brother King Aethelstan. In the year 946, on the 26th of May, King Edmund, aged just 25, was stabbed and killed in a brawl in Pucklechurch near Bath after 6 years and 212 days as king. King Edmund did have two sons, Eadwig and Edgar, but neither one of them became king at the time, most likely because they were considered too young to rule. So the crown was passed to King Edmund's brother, Eadred. Once again, the throne had passed to another brother. King Eadred ascended when his brother died on the 26th of May 946. And his coronation took place on the 16th of August in the same year. King Eadred suffered with a terrible stomach illness, which would eventually prove to be fatal. On the 23rd of November 955, at the age of 32, King Eadred died unmarried and without an heir. His reign lasted a total of 9 years and 182 days. Because King Eadred did not leave an heir to the throne fell back to the family of his older brother Edmund. So on the day of his uncle's death, Eadwig, the eldest son of Edmund, took the throne. King Eadwig was only about 15 or 16 when he was crowned, and had a relatively short reign as king when he died, aged just 19, on the 1st of October in 959, a total of 3 years and 313 days on the throne. The cause of his death has not been recorded, but we do know he too died without an heir to the throne. Therefore his brother Edgar, the youngest son of King Edmund I, became king. Very few accounts of his reign have been recorded, as at the time, people were more interested in the activities of the church leaders than the king. However, King Edgar would go on to be known as King Edgar the Peaceful, as he provided the country with peace, progression and stability, rather than war, internal conflict and chaotic disorder. King Edgar the Peaceful died on the 8th of July 975, at the age of 31. His reign lasted for 15 years, 281 days. King Edgar had 3 sons, one to his first wife and 2 to his second wife. The oldest was Edward, who at the time of King Edgar's death was just 12 years old. King Edward would reign from the 8th of July 975 to the 18th of March 978. His claim to the throne was contested by his younger half-brother Aethelred, and the dispute nearly led to a civil war in England. On the 18th of March 978, King Edmund was murdered at Corfe Castle at the age of about 16 by one of Aethelred's followers. The fact that he was perceived as a victim of his stepmother's aspirations for her own son Ethelred led to Edward being seen as a martyr and gaining the nickname Edward the Martyr. After the convenient murder of his older half-brother, Ethelred took the crown on the 18th of March 978. King Ethelred was even younger than King Edward when he ascended to the throne, at the age of just 10 years old, and would keep the throne for about 35 years, when he was forced to flee to Normandy when Sweyn Forkbeard, the Danish king, invaded England. This abandonment of the throne meant King Ethelred would become known as King Ethelred the Unready. King Sweyn Forkbeard would only sit as King of England for 41 days, from the 25th of December 1013 to the 3rd of February 1014 when he died. King Sweyn's cause of death is unknown, but many theorise he may have been killed. This normally would mean that King Sweyn's heir Canute would take the throne. However, the English nobility sent for King Ethelred to return from exile in Normandy and drive out Canute Forkbeard. The remainder of King Ethelred's reign was a constant war with Canute, and King Ethelred died on the 23rd of April 1016, aged 48. Upon the death of his father King Ethelred the Unready, King Edmund II came to power. Well, kind of, as the citizens and councillors of London chose Edmund as king. The rest of the Witan, or the King's Council, met at Southampton and chose Canute as king. Later, a peace deal was agreed, and the two kings divided the country. King Edmund II ruled over Wessex, and King Canute ruled over the rest of England. It was also written into the treaty that if one of the kings died, the other would take control of all of England. The war that King Edmund II had inherited from his father blighted Edmund's rule, but because of his valour in fending off Canute's Dutch invasion, he was bestowed with the title Ironside. King Edmund II Ironside died on the 30th of November 1016, a very short reign of only 222 days. Rumours circulate that he may have been poisoned, stabbed or shot with an arrow while sitting on the toilet. King Canute the Dane, or Nut the Great, took control of all of England. His reign technically began when the treaty between himself and King Edmund II was signed on the 18th of October 1016. King Canute had 2 sons to his first wife and 2 sons to his second. He died on the 12th of November 1035 at the age of 45, and his reign lasted a total of 19 years and 26 days. After the death of his father, Harold I was elected as the Regent of England. This is because the throne was meant to go to his younger half-brother, Harthacnut, who was stuck in Denmark at the time fighting a rebellion. Harold I was officially pronounced King of England in 1037, but King Harold I was never actually meant to rule, as he was not the son of King Canute. According to reports, King Canute's first wife could not provide the king with a son, so she adopted 2 newborn children and pretended to give birth to them, and deceived King Canute into believing they were both his children. King Harold I was also known as Harold Harefoot, which meant fleet of foot, a nickname in admiration of his hunting skills and speed. King Harold I died after 4 years, 127 days as monarch, on the 17th of March 1040, due to what some mention as a mysterious illness. King Harthacnut was ready in a force to invade England during the reign of his illegitimate half-brother Harold I, but before he could land on English soil, King Harold I died, and King Harthacnut was instantly accepted as king. On the 8th of June 1042, King Harthacnut was at a wedding, and just as he was toasting the health of the bride, he fell to the ground. The king was dead. It's thought that he may have suffered from tuberculosis. King Harthacnut was just 24 when he died, a total of 2 years and 84 days in charge, and he was the last Danish king of England. Because King Harthacnut didn't marry or have children, the crown then passed to his half-brother Edward, also known as Edward the Confessor. Edward did marry, but had no children during his 23 years and 212 days in power. So when he died on the 5th of January 1066 at the age of 63, it is thought that he most likely entrusted the kingdom to his brother-in-law, Harold Godwinson. The appointment of Harold Godwinson as king was upheld by the Witten Council, or King's Council. So on the 6th of January 1066, he was crowned King Harold II. King Harold II was the last Anglo-Saxon to be crowned as king, and most likely the first English monarch to be crowned at Westminster Abbey. He successfully repelled an invasion from Harald Hardrada of Norway in York. 2 weeks later, he would meet another invasion from William I, more well known as William the Conqueror. Unfortunately for King Harold II, 2 battles in the space of 2 weeks were too much, and he was defeated and killed at the Battle of Hastings on the 14th of October 1066, aged 44. He ruled for 282 days, and the day after his death, Edgar Aethelstan, grandson to Edmund Ironside, was elected by the Witten to be king, but the Normans now controlled England, and Edgar was never crowned, meaning he never really ruled, and he submitted to William I after 64 days. King William I, also known as William the Conqueror or sometimes as William the Bastard, took charge of England on the 25th of December 1066. He claimed that the throne had been promised to him by his second cousin, Edward the Confessor. This was the reason for the invasion of England and the defeat of King Harold II at the Battle of Hastings. On the 9th of September 1087, at the age of 59, King William I fell from his horse whilst besieging the French city of Nantes. William died from the fall and left behind 9 children after 20 years and 259 days in charge, one of which was William II. King William II was coronated on the 26th of September 1087. He was also known as William Rufus, most likely because of his red hair. During his reign as king, William II did not marry or have any children. On the 2nd of August 1100, William II was shot with an arrow at the age of 44, whilst on a hunting trip in New Forest near Hampshire. Some believe that it was an accident when he was shot by one of his own men, but others believe he was shot and killed deliberately, on the instructions of his younger brother, Henry. The latter would make sense, as Henry was the one who gained the throne after the death of his brother. So after the reign of King William II, which lasted 12 years and 311 days, William the Conqueror's 4th son Henry took power on the 5th of August 1100. King Henry I, also known as Henry Beauclerc, provided England with good laws but harsh punishments, which earned him the nickname Lion of Justice. King Henry had 2 children during his first marriage, but his only son William drowned in an event known as the White Ship Disaster of 1120. King Henry I married again to try and have another son, but this marriage was childless. Henry I therefore declares his daughter Matilda as his heir, although King Henry was in talks with his nephew Stephen of Blois becoming the heir before naming Matilda. After 35 years and 119 days in charge, King Henry I died on the 1st of December 1135 due to a week-long illness. Upon the death of his uncle, Stephen of Blois managed to take the crown. Obviously, King Henry I's daughter, Matilda, disputed Stephen's claim, but Stephen was eventually crowned king on the 22nd of December 1135. Matilda invaded England in 1139, which created a civil war known as the Anarchy. In the November of 1153, King Stephen and Matilda came to a compromise by signing the Treaty of Westminster. The treaty stated that Matilda's son Henry Kirkmantle would ascend to the throne upon King Stephen's death. 18 years and 308 days into King Stephen's reign, on the 25th of October in 1154, he died from a stomach illness whilst on a visit to Dover, where he was meeting his cousin Thierry, Count of Flanders, to maybe settle his affairs before he died. As the Treaty of Westminster stated, Henry Kirkmantle inherited England from King Stephen and was coronated on the 19th of December 1154 to become King Henry II of England. He would go on to have 8 children in total. In 1170, his eldest son to survive childhood, also called Henry, was crowned as a junior king of England, like a co-ruler, and was therefore known as Henry the Young King. In 1173, young Henry and his brothers Geoffrey and Richard rebelled against their father, King Henry II. King Henry II defeated their skirmish to retain power. In 1183, young Henry led another revolt, during which he died of dysentery. In 1183, Geoffrey also died. Richard had another attempt at a revolt and led a final rebellion in 1189. On the 6th of July 1189, Richard won, and his father, King Henry II, retreated to Anjou, where he died from a bleeding ulcer. King Henry spent 34 years, 200 days as the monarch of England. King Henry II's third son, Richard, took charge of England and was coronated on the 3rd of September 1189. Although King Richard I was crowned King of England, most of his time was spent outside the country in the Duchy of Aquitaine in France. On the 26th of March 1199, King Richard I was shot with a crossbow bolt in the shoulder, and the wound turned gangrenous. The person who shot him turned out to be a boy, who said that King Richard had killed his father and 2 brothers, and that he wished to kill King Richard as revenge. As a final act of mercy, Richard forgave the boy and ordered him to be freed. 9 years and 216 days of King Richard I's reign came to an end on the 6th of April 1199, when the gangrenous wound eventually led to his demise. Richard did not have any children, which means that he did not leave an heir to the throne. So his younger brother John Lackland would take the throne as King John, and he was coronated on the 27th of May 1199. King John was eventually excommunicated by the Pope, and on the 15th of June 1215 at Runnymede, King John was compelled to sign the Magna Carta. He also saw a civil war known as the First Barons' War, during which he contracted dysentery, which turned out to be fatal. King John died on the 19th of October 1216, aged 49, and reigned for a total of 17 years, 146 days. This meant the throne would pass to King John's son, Henry of Winchester, and once he was crowned on the 28th of October 1216, he became known as King Henry III. King Henry III took power in the middle of the First Barons' War, aged just 9 years old. During the war, the young king's armies were led by William Marshal, who would lead them to victory. In 1264, King Henry III was captured during the Second Barons' War and was forced to create a parliament at Westminster, which established the House of Commons. After 56 years and 20 days in power, King Henry III died after a battle with illness on the 16th of November 1272. King Henry III's firstborn son, Edward, ascended to the throne. King Edward I was also known as Edward Longshanks, due to his height of 6'2", which at the time was very rare. King Edward I had his sights set on United Britain and created the title Prince of Wales for his eldest son, also called Edward, when he defeated the Welsh chieftains who presided over Wales at the time, meaning King Edward I was the first King of England to become the King of Wales as well. He also earned the nickname Hammer of the Scots, due to his invasion of Scotland and recognition as Overlord of Scotland in 1290. On the way to meet Robert the Bruce in battle, King Edward I developed dysentery, which eventually got worse, and on the 7th of July 1307, aged 68, he died. King Edward I reigned for 34 years and 230 days, and left the throne to his fourth son, the only one to outlive him, and Prince of Wales, Edward of Carnarvon. King Edward II came to power the day after his father's death, on the 8th of July 1307. In 1314, he was defeated by Robert the Bruce and the Scots at the Battle of Bannockburn, meaning Scotland became an independent country once again. King Edward II was not a well-liked leader, and a parliament convened to discuss his removal. King Edward II agreed to abdicate the throne on the 20th of January 1327. After 19 years and 197 days, his reign came to an end, and his son, Edward of Windsor, was installed on the throne. On the 21st of September 1327, Edward, now known again as Edward of Carnarvon, was being held at Berkeley Castle when he was thought to have been murdered at the age of 43, under the orders of his wife and her lover. Edward of Windsor took power on the 25th of January 1327, after the abdication of his father, King Edward II. About a week later, King Edward III was coronated on the 1st of February at the age of 14. His reign lasted a total of 50 years and 148 days. During that period, the beginning of the 100 Years' War took place in 1338, and the bubonic plague, or the Black Death as it is often referred to, landed in England. About half of England's population was wiped out by the plague. King Edward III died of a stroke on the 21st of June 1377, at the age of 64. Because the king's eldest son Edward the Black Prince died in 1376, the throne would pass to King Edward III's grandson, Richard of Bordeaux. At the age of 10 years old, on the day after the death of his grandfather, King Edward III, King Richard II ascended to the throne. King Richard II's reign lasted 22 years and 100 days. In this period, he did not have any children, meaning he didn't have an heir to replace him when he was deposed on the 29th of September 1399 by Henry of Bolingbroke. Richard was allowed to live on after being deposed, but was held captive in Pontefract Castle until his death on around the 14th of February 1400. It is thought that he was murdered, probably from starvation. King Henry IV came to power after deposing King Richard III on the 29th of September 1399. The day after, Parliament accepted Henry as king. Henry was the son of John of Gaunt and the first Duke of Lancaster, as well as the grandson of King Edward III. King Henry IV spent most of his 13 years and 172 days in charge defending himself from rebellions and assassination plots. He would also suffer from bouts of acute severe illness, the last being in March 1413. King Henry IV died on the 20th of March 1413 at the age of 45, and the crown passed to his son, also named Henry. On the 21st of March 1314, Henry of Monmouth took to the throne, becoming King Henry V after the death of his father. King Henry V's reign lasted a total of 9 years and 164 days, and he was due to become the King of France as well as King of England and Wales. However, before he could take the French crown, he died on the 31st of August 1422 at the age of 35, most likely due to contracting dysentery while campaigning in France. King Henry V had one son, also named Henry, who was only a baby at the time of his death. So at just 8 months old, on the 1st of September 1422, King Henry VI became the English and Welsh monarch. The month after, on the 21st of October 1422, at just 9 months old, he succeeded his grandfather King Charles VI of France to become the French monarch as well. He is also the only English king to achieve becoming king in both England and France. King Henry VI's reign would last a total of 38 years and 185 days, and came to an end at the Battle of Towton on the 4th of March 1461. King Henry VI's forces were defeated at the battle by Edward of York and forced King Henry into exile in Scotland. Edward of York was the Yorkist claimant to the throne, and after King Henry VI fled to Scotland, he became King Edward IV on the same day. King Edward IV's first reign would last until the 3rd of October 1470, a total of 9 years and 214 days, due to a revolt by Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, and his brother George, Duke of Clarence, in which they restored King Henry VI as the English monarch. King Edward IV narrowly avoided capture whilst fleeing the revolt, and was forced to exile in Bruges, known as Flanders at the time. So on the 3rd of October 1470, King Henry VI was restored to the throne. However, Henry's years in hiding and captivity had taken their toll. This meant that Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, and George, Duke of Clarence essentially ruled in his name. King Henry VI's second reign lasted 6 months, 191 days, as Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, declared war on Burgundy. The region's ruler, Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy, responded by giving King Edward IV all the assistance he needed to win back the throne. With Charles the Bold on his side and reconciling with his brother, George, Duke of Clarence, King Edward IV would once again be recognised as King of England and Wales on the 11th of April 1471. He marched into London unopposed and captured King Henry VI. Henry was then imprisoned in the Tower of London, and on the 21st of May 1471, aged 49, he was allegedly murdered on the orders of King Edward IV, although the king's records show that he died of melancholia. King Edward IV's second reign lasted until his death at the age of 40 on the 9th of April 1483, a total of 11 years and 364 days. His death was seen as being due to increasing illness, but some believe that he could have been poisoned. King Edward V inherited the throne on the 9th of April 1483, after the death of his father King Edward IV. King Edward V had one of the shortest reigns as he took power for only 78 days, due to his uncle, Richard Duke of Gloucester, deposing the king and declaring King Edward V and his younger brother, Richard of Shrewsbury, Duke of York, as illegitimate heirs to the throne. The sons of King Edward IV were locked away in the Tower of London, and came to be known as the Princes in the Tower. The boys apparently disappeared. Most believe that they had been murdered by the orders of King Richard III. Neither one of the boys had even reached their teens when they disappeared in the August of 1483. Edward was 12 years old, and his younger brother Richard was only 10 or 11. King Richard III came to power on the 26th of June 1483, after declaring his brother King Edward IV's sons to be illegitimate. He too would have quite a short reign, which lasted 2 years and 58 days, as at the age of 32, Richard III was defeated and killed at the Battle of Bosworth Field on the 22nd of August 1485. His only legitimate son, Edward of Middleham, died very young in 1484, which meant King Richard III did not have an heir to the throne. After the Battle of Bosworth Field and defeating King Richard III, the War of the Roses ended, and Henry Tudor seized the crown to become the first monarch from the House of Tudor, becoming King Henry VII on the 22nd of August 1485. King Henry VII then married Elizabeth of York to unite both of the warring houses of Lancaster and York. Henry VII would keep the throne for 23 years and 243 days, and on the 21st of April 1509 he died of tuberculosis. Upon his death he was succeeded by his third child and second son, also called Henry Tudor. This Henry Tudor is probably one of the most famous kings of England, King Henry VIII. King Henry VIII began his reign on the 22nd of April 1509. He famously had 6 wives, 2 he divorced, 2 he executed by beheading, one of his wives died, and the other survived. Later in life, King Henry VIII became obese, probably due to a recurring injury in his leg becoming ulcerated, and he had to be moved about with the aid of mechanical devices. Eventually, King Henry VIII died on the 28th of January 1547, at the age of 55. Upon King Henry VIII's death, the throne passed to his only surviving son, Edward Tudor. King Edward VI was only 9 years old at the time, but his father's will named 16 executors, who would make decisions until Edward reached the age of 18. King Edward's uncle, Edward Seymour, 1st Earl of Hertford, was appointed Lord Protector by the 16 executors. King Edward VI would never get a chance to reign over England as an adult, as he died aged 15 on the 6th of July 1553. The cause of his death is unknown. He did suffer from illness which gradually got worse, possibly tuberculosis. Rumours at the time pointed towards the young king being poisoned, but these rumours were never proven. King Edward VI named his cousin Lady Jane Grey as his heir, which overruled his father's will, which stated that if King Edward VI were to die, then Mary Tudor, King Henry VIII's first daughter, would succeed Edward. 4 days after King Edward VI's death, on the 10th of July 1553, Lady Jane Grey was proclaimed Queen. 9 days later, on the 19th of July 1553, Queen Jane was deposed by Mary Tudor, after Mary's support grew and Jane's support drastically declined when the Privy Council of England switched their allegiance to Mary. Lady Jane Grey, also now known as the 9 Days Queen, was imprisoned in the Tower of London on the charge of treason. On the 12th of February 1554, Lady Jane Grey and her husband were both executed. Jane was about 17 years old when she died. On the 19th of July 1553, Mary Tudor came to power after she deposed Lady Jane Grey and became Queen Mary I. Excluding the brief and disputed reigns of Lady Jane Grey and Empress Matilda, Queen Mary became the first true queen to sit on the throne. At the age of 37, Queen Mary I desperately wanted an heir to succeed her, so once she secured the crown, she started looking for a husband. She married Prince Philip of Spain on the 25th of July 1554. He became co-monarch on the day of their wedding and would be documented as King Philip. Sometime in May 1558, Queen Mary became weak and ill. She lasted until the 17th of November 1558, when she died aged 42. During her 5 years and 122 days on the throne, she was not able to produce an heir, and so the crown passed to her half-sister, Elizabeth Tudor. On the same day as Queen Mary's death, Queen Elizabeth I took to power, as she was the last remaining child of King Henry VIII. Queen Elizabeth I was 25 when she inherited the crown. It was expected that Elizabeth would marry and produce an heir during her 44 years and 128 days as queen. However, this was not the case. Despite multiple courtships, she never did, and is sometimes referred to as the Virgin Queen. On the 24th of March 1603, aged 69, Queen Elizabeth I passed away. and because she never produced an heir, the crown would go to her cousin and great-great-grandson of King Henry VII, James Charles Stuart, who at the time was King James VI of Scotland. King James VI of Scotland ascended to the throne on the same day as Queen Elizabeth I's death, and became King James I of England, Wales and Ireland. Because he was the King of Scotland and then became the King of England, Wales and Ireland, James became the first King of Great Britain, as the countries united under one king. He was also the first king to come from the House of Stuart. King James I would sit upon the throne for a total of 22 years and 4 days, and after a torrid time with illness, he died on the 27th of March 1625, after a severe attack of dysentery at the age of 58. King James I had 7 children during his lifetime. His eldest son, Henry Frederick, Prince of Wales, died in 1612, so his second son Charles rose to power after the death of his father. King Charles I believed in a divine right of kings, which did not go down well with the English or Scottish parliaments, and in time this led to the English Civil War in 1642. He was eventually defeated in 1645. 4 years later he was tried, convicted and executed aged 48 for high treason on the 30th of January 1649. King Charles I's reign lasted 23 years and 310 days, and during that time he had 9 children. After the execution of King Charles I, between the 30th of January 1649 and the 16th of December 1653, there was no single English head of state. England was ruled by the Rump Parliament and the English Council of State, which became known as the Commonwealth of England. This meant the monarchy had essentially been abolished. On the 20th of April 1653, Oliver Cromwell dissolved Parliament by force. Then on the 16th of December 1653, Oliver Cromwell won the vote to become Lord Protector. Cromwell held this position of Lord Protector until his death on the 3rd of September 1658, when he died aged 59, most likely from sepsis caused by a urine infection. Richard Cromwell, Oliver Cromwell's third son, was told on the same day of his father's death that he would be the Protectorate's successor. Richard Cromwell's time as Lord Protector was short, a total of 247 days, when he was forcibly removed by the English Committee of Safety on the 7th of May 1659. He then fled to France, but then returned to England in either 1680 or 1681, and eventually died on the 12th of July 1712 at the age of 85. After a year of anarchy, Charles Stuart was asked to take the throne by the English Parliament. Charles Stuart had already been proclaimed King of Scotland after the death of his father, King Charles I. England decided to restore the monarchy and proclaimed Charles, King Charles II, on the 29th of May 1660. During his reign of 24 years and 254 days, he fathered many illegitimate children, but no heir. King Charles II suddenly fell ill on the 2nd of February 1685. This sudden illness aroused suspicion, and many thought the king had been poisoned, but it is more likely that he died due to a kidney dysfunction. He finally passed away on the 6th of February at the age of 54. The throne then passed to his brother James due to King Charles II not having a legitimate heir. King James II came to power on the same day as his older brother's death. He sat upon the throne for a total of 3 years and 321 days. His reign came to an end when he abdicated the throne whilst attempting to flee the country on the 11th of December 1688. On the 23rd of the same month, he successfully fled to France, where he died in exile on the 16th of September in 1701 from a brain hemorrhage at the age of 67. When King James II fled to France, no monarch sat on the throne between the 23rd of December 1688 and the 13th of February 1689. A convention of Parliament decided that the throne should go to Mary, King James II's daughter. Some believed that Queen Mary II should be the sole ruler, but her husband William of Orange would be joint ruler with her. This event is known as the Glorious Revolution. On the 13th of February 1689, Queen Mary II and King William III, also known as William of Orange, began their joint reign over Great Britain, which became known as that of William and Mary. Throughout their time on the throne, King William III and Queen Mary II produced no heir, and on the 28th of December 1694, 5 years and 319 days into her reign, Queen Mary II died at the age of 32 from a fatal form of smallpox. King William III would keep the throne after Queen Mary II's death, as he was joint ruler for life, and he would keep the crown until the 8th of March 1702, when he eventually died from pneumonia following a complication after he broke his collarbone falling from a horse. He reigned for a total of 13 years and 24 days. Due to Queen Mary II and King William III not having any children, therefore not leaving an heir to the throne, Queen Mary II's sister Anne took the crown upon the death of King William III. Queen Anne's reign started on the 8th of March 1702, and during her time in power she oversaw the Acts of the Union on the 1st of May 1707, where the Kingdom of England and the Kingdom of Scotland, which were sovereign states with separate legislators, are joined together to form the Kingdom of Great Britain. Between 1713 and 1714, Queen Anne would go through bouts of illness, which would get worse each time during the July of 1714. On the 30th of July 1714, she suffered a stroke which rendered her unable to speak. Queen Anne's reign went on till her death on the 1st of August 1714 at the age of 49. Her time in power lasted a total of 12 years and 147 days. Queen Anne did have 5 children, however all of them died at a young age, so following her death, the succession of the crown went to the nearest Protestant relative of the Stuart line, Sophia of Hanover, the granddaughter of James I. Unfortunately, Sophia died a few weeks earlier, so the throne passed on to her son, George. King George I began his reign on the 1st of August 1714, the same day as Queen Anne's death, and he was the first of the Hanoverian monarchs. At the time of his ascension, he was 54, and didn't speak any English, which often meant that national policy was left to the government, the head of which was Sir Robert Walpole, the first de facto Prime Minister. King George I ruled for a total of 12 years and 315 days. On the 9th of June 1727, on his 6th trip to his native Hanover since becoming king, he suffered a stroke. He was taken to his brother's palace where he died 2 days later, on the 11th of June 1727, aged 67. Upon King George I's death, his only son George Augustus inherited the crown to become King George II. During his time in power, he would have 8 children, his eldest being Frederick Louis, Prince of Wales. Unfortunately, Frederick died suddenly in 1751, and his eldest son, Prince George William Frederick, became the heir apparent. At the age of 76, after 33 years and 126 days in power, King George II died on the 25th of October 1760, when he fell to the ground as he was walking towards his desk. The king was lifted into bed and later died. On the same day, his grandson Prince George William Frederick took the throne to become King George III. Many events unfolded under King George III's reign. Britain lost 13 of its North American colonies in the American War of Independence, and the banning of the transatlantic slave trade, just to name a couple. Later in life, King George III suffered from mental illness, which eventually became permanent. This is suspected to be bipolar disorder or porphyria. Due to his state of mind, his eldest son was named Prince Regent. King George III eventually died on the 29th of January 1820, after 59 years and 96 days on the throne. He was 81 years old at the time of his death. He is still to this day the longest lived and longest reigning male British monarch. His son the Prince Regent, George Augustus Frederick, ascends to become King George IV on the same day. King George IV would drink heavily and lead a very indulgent lifestyle, even before he was king, so much so that in the late 1820s his health began to decline. Towards the end of his life, George IV spent whole days in bed and suffered from acute spasms of breathlessness. On the morning of the 26th of June 1830, King George IV died at the age of 76, after 10 years and 149 days in power. Physicians at the time concluded that King George IV had died from upper gastrointestinal bleeding, from a ruptured blood vessel in his stomach. King George IV did not have an heir to the throne, as his one daughter died in 1817 before he even became king. The throne therefore passed to his younger brother, William Henry, who became King William IV on the same day as King George IV's death. At the time, King William IV was 64 years old when he ascended, and was the oldest person to inherit the British throne until 2022, when he was overtaken by the current British monarch, King Charles III. King William IV spent his youth in the Royal Navy, where he sailed the seas of North America and the Caribbean, becoming known as the Sailor King later in life. He spent a total of 6 years and 360 days on the throne, and during this time he had 2 daughters, but both died during infancy. He also had many illegitimate children, but they were unable to succeed him. His death came on the 20th of June 1837, aged 71 years old, and his niece, Princess Alexandria Victoria of Kent, was next in line to the throne, due to her being the daughter of his brother, Prince Edward, who was King George III's 4th son. She became Queen Victoria on the day of her uncle's death at the age of 18. Queen Victoria went on to marry her cousin Albert in 1840, and they had 9 children together. Prince Albert became a huge influence in Queen Victoria's reign, so when he died in 1861 at the age of 42, Victoria was devastated. So much so that she wore black for the rest of her life until her death on the 22nd of January 1901. Queen Victoria sat on the British throne for a total of 63 years and 216 days, and lived to the age of 81 years old, and at the time she was the longest reigning British monarch. Upon his mother's death, Albert Edward was crowned King Edward VII. During his reign, he and his wife had 6 children. His eldest child, Prince Albert Victor Christian Edward Duke of Clarence, unexpectedly died of pneumonia in 1892. King Edward VII was in power for 9 years and 105 days when he passed away on the 6th of May 1910 at the age of 68. It is said that he suffered from several heart attacks but refused to stop working. He eventually lost consciousness and was taken to bed. 15 minutes later, he died. King Edward VII's second eldest son, George Frederick Ernest Albert, became King George V after his father's death. King George V oversaw the First World War, after which he changed his house name from Saxe-Coburg-Gotha to the House of Windsor, as his original house name sounded too German. Later in life, King George V suffered from health problems due to his smoking habit. On the 15th of January 1936, he went to his bedroom complaining of a cold, where his health slowly deteriorated, and he drifted in and out of consciousness. King George V eventually died on the 20th of January 1936 at the age of 70, after 25 years and 260 days in power. Upon his death, his son Edward Albert Christian George Andrew Patrick David became King Edward VIII. King Edward VIII's reign would end with him abdicating the throne on the 11th of December 1936, as he wished to marry a twice-divorced American woman called Wallis Simpson. At the time, this was frowned upon, so he abdicated in favour of his brother, Albert Frederick Arthur George, after 327 days in power. Edward then took the title Duke of Windsor and went to live out his life in France. He died in Paris on the 28th of May 1972, at the age of 77. When Edward abdicated on the 11th of December 1936, his brother King George VI took to power. King George VI was in power at the time of World War II, during which Buckingham Palace was bombed during the Blitz. His younger brother, the Duke of Kent, was also killed during the war. George VI's health began to decline due to the stress of the war and heavy smoking. He then developed lung cancer as well as other health problems. On the 6th of February 1952, King George VI was found dead in his bed after suffering from a coronary thrombosis during the night. He was aged 56 and his reign lasted 15 years and 58 days. After the death of her father, King George VI, on the 6th of February 1952, Princess Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor ascended to the throne to become Queen Elizabeth II at the age of 25. Her reign lasted 70 years and 214 days, making her the longest reigning monarch in British history. Queen Elizabeth would live to the age of 96 and died on the 8th of September 2022 from what is described as old age. There were also reports that she had a type of bone cancer at the time of her death. Queen Elizabeth II's eldest son Charles Philip Arthur George inherited the crown from his mother on the same day, becoming King Charles III. King Charles III is currently 75 and still the British monarch at the time of recording. Thank you for watching. If you found this video interesting or informative, please don't forget to leave a like on the video and consider subscribing, as I do plan on creating a video for each monarch for greater context as to who they were. And please don't forget to leave your thoughts and feedback in the comments below, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.